Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. How's it going? Welcome. We are back for another Bible story reading. For those of you who might be joining one of these videos for the very first time, let me tell you what we have going on here. We go through the different stories of the Bible for people who have either never read the stories, who have only heard what other people have told them about them, or maybe they've forgotten what the stories are. Whatever the reason is, we go through them so that you can know them. That way, if they come up in conversation, you can understand them intelligently. Sometimes we listen to sermons and we don't always understand everything that the preacher or speaker is saying in the sermon because they might only tell you a little piece of a story rather than telling you the whole story. So we give you the opportunity to know the entire story. That way, when it comes up, you know what is being spoken about and what it's referring to. If you are watching this video on YouTube, please hit the like button and the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot. We go live on Facebook and then we upload these videos to YouTube. And if you want to see some more videos that we have on Facebook, you can go search for Get Clear Teachings on Facebook and find even more teachings and videos. So, I just ate and I had something stuck in my throat and I apologize for that. But it's kind of irritating me. Let me get you caught up to where we've been. We've been going through the story of David. In the last story we read out of 2 Samuel chapter 15, this terrible thing happened. David's son Absalom has betrayed him. Absalom became angry with David many years before because one of David's sons slept with Absalom's sister. And David really didn't do anything about it. He didn't really punish him. So Absalom took it upon himself to kill his brother. It was his half-brother. And he killed him a couple years later. Then he ran away from David. Well, after some time, David really missed his son Absalom, and he called for him to come back to the palace. So Absalom has come back to the palace. He was there for 4 years, and in that time, he gathered the community he kind of got them to rally on his side and set up this coup, if you will, to take over the kingdom. And now David has fled because his son Absalom, he's afraid he's going to come after him and kill him. And basically, his son has taken command of the throne. Well, David had a friend named Hushai the Archite, and his friend was going to go with him while he was on the run. And he said, "Don't do that. It would be better for you to go back to my son Absalom, go back to the palace and hang out with him and send me a report of what's going on back at the palace." We're going to pick up now with where David is now still on the run from Absalom in chapter 16. When David had gone a little beyond the summit, Ziba, Mephibosheth's servant, was right there to meet him. He had a pair of saddled donkeys loaded with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 bunches of summer fruit, and a clay jar of wine. The king said to Ziba, "Why do you have these?" Ziba answered, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride. The bread and the summer fruit are for the young men to eat, and the wine is for those to drink who become exhausted in the wilderness." "Where is your master's grandson?" the king asked. "Why, he's staying in Jerusalem," Ziba replied to the king, "for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will be restore my grandfather's kingdom to me.'" The king said to Ziba, "All that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours." "I bow before you," Ziba said. "May I find favor with you, my lord, the king." When King David got to Bahurim, a man belonging to the family of the house of Saul was just coming out. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he was yelling curses as he approached. He threw stones at David and all the royal servants and people and the warriors on David's right and left. Shimei said as he cursed, get out, you man of bloodshed, you wicked man. The Lord has paid you back for all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you became king. And the Lord has handed the kingdom over to your son Absalom. Look, you are in trouble because you're a man of bloodshed." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and remove his head." The king replied, "Sons of Zeruiah, do we agree on anything? He curses me this way because the Lord told him, 'Curse David.' Therefore, who can say, 'Why did you do that?'" Then David said to Abishai and all his servants, "Look, my own son, my own flesh and blood, intends to take my life. How much more then can this Benjamite do? Leave him alone. Let him curse me. The Lord has told him to. Perhaps the Lord will see my affliction and restore goodness to me instead of Shimei's curses today." So David and his men proceeded along the road as Shimei was going along the ridge of the hill opposite him. As Shimei went, he cursed David, threw stones at him, and kicked up dust. Finally, the king and all the people with him arrived, exhausted, so they rested there. Now Absalom and all the Israelites came to Jerusalem. Ahithophel was also with him. When David's friend Hushai the Archite came to Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" "Is this your loyalty to your friend?" Absalom asked Hushai. "Why didn't you go with your friend?" "Not at all," Hushai answered Absalom. "I am on the side of the one that the Lord, this people, and all the men of Israel have chosen. I will stay with him. Furthermore, whom will I serve if not his son? As I served in your father's presence, I will also serve in yours." Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give me your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel replied to Absalom, "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. When all of Israel hears that you have become repulsive to your father, everyone with you will be encouraged." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all of Israel. Now, the advice of Ahithophel, given in those days, was like someone asking about a word from God. Such was the regard that both David and Absalom had for Ahithophel's advice. And that's the end of chapter 16. I keep thinking this is such a riveting story. There are three ways that we look at these stories when we read them. What does it say? We have to have reading comprehension. If we don't read the words on the page, we don't know what they say. What was it saying to the people that it was written to the time, the culture, the history? We have to understand what's going on in context. And last, what, if anything, is this saying to us today? We see that David is still on the run. He's still trying to get as far away from Absalom as he can. And as he's going, he comes along Mephibosheth's servant. Now, if you remember, Mephibosheth was Jonathan's son way back in the early days when Saul was still alive. Him and his son Jonathan were still alive. David was best friends with Jonathan. And after Saul's death and the death of all of his sons, he said, "Is there anybody left in the house of Saul?" And the person left was Mephibosheth. So now Mephibosheth's servant has come to him and has given him food and wine and things to take for his journey, including some donkeys for them to ride on. Mephibosheth and all of that house are still very loyal to David. But as they're going along, when they get to a place called Bahurim, there was a man that still belonged to the family of the house of Saul. So he was a distant relative of Saul. And he was still upset over the fact that David now had the kingdom and not Saul's family. And he starts throwing rocks at David and his men. And he's cursing David the whole time. You know, get out of here, and using curse words and swearing at him. And you're in trouble. The reason your son even took the kingdom away from you is because of what you did to the house of Saul. Which we know from reading it that David did not kill anybody in the house of Saul. But this man still has an axe to grind. And his servant that is with him says, "Hey, We shouldn't have to put up with this from this guy throwing rocks at us. Why don't let me go and chop his head off? And David says, have you learned anything? Do we not agree on anything? Look, this guy's cursing me because it's the will of God. God told him to do this. Just my own son is trying to kill me. How much more can this idiot do? Just let him go. Just let him do what he's going to do. And so the guy continues to curse them all the way until they get to where they're going. And finally they arrive and they're exhausted and they're tired. So we leave off there. If this was a movie, we would cut to the next scene. And the next thing that we see now is back in Jerusalem is Absalom. And Ahithophel, David's friend, Hushai, I got some names mixed up. Hushai, David's friend, went back to Jerusalem, and Absalom says to him, is this a trick from my father? Why are you here? And he goes, oh, no. He says, I'm here because I'm trying to be loyal to you. I mean, I served your father. Now I'm going to serve you. And he says, I'm on your side. I'm on the side that the people choose, that the Lord has chosen. Well, we know, because we read the previous chapter, that Hushai really is a friend of David's. And David told him to go back to the palace and serve his son. He says, who knows, maybe you can even send me reports out of the palace. So that's what he does. He goes back. In the meantime, Absalom says to Ahithophel, who is kind of the advisor. He was the advisor to David, and now he's the advisor to them. He's like, what should I do? And Ahithophel gives him this advice. He says, you know what you should do? You should go ahead and sleep with all of your father's concubines. Remember, when David left, he left all of his concubines back at the palace to take care of it. And I can't remember how many there were. There were quite a few. But he left them all back at the palace. And he says, take them and sleep with them. And when the people realize, ew, you've become a disgust in the sight of David, they'll be more excited. How many times do you watch a sporting event and you see, let's say a football game, for example, and the team that you're rooting for takes down somebody on the other team? We cheer even more, right? You get really excited. Well, that's kind of what's going on here. This is the advice he's giving him. He says, do that, and the people will be like, yeah, because he's trying to get them all rallied up so that they are strong supporters of Absalom. So that's exactly what Absalom does. He pitches a tent on the roof, and one by one, he takes these concubines in, and he sleeps with them. Now, whether he did that with the doors to the tent open for all of Israel to see or not, I don't believe he did that, but everybody certainly knew what it was that he was doing when he brought these concubines into the tents. And that's where this story leaves off. I don't know about you, but I think that was some pretty bad advice that Absalom took, because we know just from the things that we've read that is absolutely against God's design and plan. That is not something that people should do. Remember, Saul did things that he was not supposed to, and he lost the kingdom because of it. David does his best to try to stay in the will of God. We see that even when he's being cursed and rocks are being thrown at him, he still says, well, this is God's will. If this is what I'm supposed to have happen to me in life, then this is what I'm supposed to have happen. And he does his best not to turn away from God, not to get off the path that God has set him on, no matter how miserable that path may seem. And sometimes in life we go through some pretty miserable things too. And it would be easy for us to take revenge. Very easily could have chopped off this guy's head that was cursing him, but he didn't do that. And sometimes in life we just have to say, I don't understand why these things are happening to me. They're terrible, they're painful, I don't like them. But this must be what God's will is. And that's kind of what was going on here with David in this whole situation. We're going to continue with the story of David and Absalom and all of this that's going on the next time that we get together. But I hope you learned something today. Most importantly, I hope as you're going through these stories and you're hearing them, that you're not only learning about the stories, but that you are learning about the character of God, and that you are finding ways that these things may apply to your life today. Because one thing we know is that the Word of God, this Bible is the Word of God, is a living word. It's a breathing word, and it's for all time. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So the way that he responded to, although there may have been some cultural differences, a lot of cultural differences from today, the way God responds in situations today is the same way that he responded to situations then. So we learn a lot about the character of God as we go through these. Well, I hope you learned something. I'm excited for us to get together the next time, and I hope you have a great day. God bless you.